of the biggest challenges as a VR developer is constantly hitting your target frame rate. Luckily for us, almost all the VR learnings from the past decade still apply today. Now, I can't summarize all that information in 10 minutes, but I can share the best tips I know and point you in the right direction for the rest. We'll discuss why performance matters, the general trade-offs you have to make, and then share tools, tips, and practical examples. The Meta Quest 3 and 3S are incredible pieces of hardware. They are roughly 2 times more powerful than the Quest 2, and perhaps 3 to 4 times more powerful than the original Quest 1, which was released just 5 years ago. I encourage you to read last year's Best on Quest 3 post, which highlights the work of some great devs making their titles shine on the Quest 3 family. These devices give you more of everything: more computation, more shader complexity, higher texture resolution, and higher texture quality. What stood out in particular is the comments from developers of Red Matter 2. They couldn't simply rely on using their textures from PC. They had to create even higher quality assets just for the Quest 3. Now, with all that power, why does performance matter so much? 2 reasons. First, even though the chips powering a Quest 3 are similar to those in high-end phones, you still have to accomplish so much more to deliver a VR experience. You are targeting at least 72 frames per second, ideally 90 frames or even 120 if you can pull it off. And you have to render these frames twice, one for each display. Second, players will notice any inconsistent frame rate, whether consciously or not. A normal phone app that occasionally stutters when you scroll, it's annoying, but it's still usable. In VR, this is a deal breaker. In my opinion, smooth performance is an absolute prerequisite to creating a great experience. Be smooth like butter. At an extremely high level, this is an overview of the trade-offs you have to make. In the first column, these are the broad elements that define the complexity of your scene: vertex count, texture complexity, shader complexity, particle count, and resolution. If you push on one, you may have to reduce others. And no matter what, you need to keep the number of draw calls down. In the second column, these are elements you want to be very careful including in your game. As we'll see, they are possible in the Quest 3, but you'll have to plan very carefully for them. In the final column, these are easy wins that you should absolutely try to leverage. 4-time multi-sample anti-aliasing is a must. The alpha to coverage blend technique is essential. Particles and animations are easy ways to bring your environments to life. So what can you do on the Quest 3? Well, that very much depends on which visual approach you go for. This is probably the first big decision you will have to make for your title because it impacts so many things. Let's take a look at a few examples. With our game, Sweet Surrender, we went with a very stylized and low poly approach. On the Quest 3, we pulled off expensive post-processing effects like bloom and HDR. We could afford these effects because of our low poly approach and our minimal texture usage and our extremely simple pixel shaders. This allowed us to crank up the visual effects, particles, animations, and overall output resolution. In Eye of the Temple, you can explore a complex, interconnected world with 0 loading screens. On the Quest 3, we focus our performance budget on atmospheric elements that further immerse the player. We added real-time shadows cast by your flickering torch and more texture detail wherever possible. The developers behind Brink Traveler built amazing photorealistic volumetric scenes of some of the most gorgeous real-life environments on our planet. They pushed the limit on texture quality and environmental detail to transport players to beautiful locations nearly indistinguishable from reality. These are 3 quite visually distinct titles that focused on different techniques to stand out. You have to do the same. Very broadly speaking, there are 2 general types of performance problems. The first is sustained low frame rate. This is usually quite easy to identify and address. You're simply doing too much. The second type are short performance spikes. These small stutters can quickly lead to discomfort for players. They can be harder to detect, but luckily, we have some great tools available to us. OVR Metrics is a tool developed by Meta, which every developer should install on their headsets. It's an extremely lightweight overlay that will display key performance details while you use your app. It will show the frame rate, stale frames, tears, CPU load, GPU load, and a number of other values that can quickly help you take the first steps to identify and address performance problems. If there's only one thing you take away from this talk, it's to become familiar with this tool. It will show you drops as you move around in your scene. It will tell you if the pressure is on the CPU side or on the GPU. If you turn on GPU profiling mode, it will even show you extra GPU statistics like vertex count, fill percentage, average shader ops, texture access, and cache misses, and other details that can really help you drill down. With the handy controller shortcuts available, you can easily capture screenshots and videos to make further analysis easier. Once you have identified low-performing regions of the game, you can go back to your engine on the PC to look at the rendering stats for a particular scene or location and investigate the possible causes. Here I'm sharing a screenshot from Unity's rendering statistics, which will show you at a quick glance the number of rendered vertices as well as the number of draw calls, both key values that you want to minimize. Unity can also provide individual render frame breakdowns, allowing you to step through each individual element that is being rendered in a particular frame. This is especially helpful to understand why certain elements are being batched together in a draw call or not. Other engines like Unreal and Godot also provide similar tools, and Meta provides a fork of RenderDoc that can perform the same analysis. Now, let's jump through a series of rapid-fire tips. Plan ahead. Invest time upfront to think about your visual style and performance requirements. Define your look with these constraints in mind, and keep performance in mind throughout development. I encourage you to get to your target frame rate first, and only then focus on increasing your visual quality. Remember, almost every significant change you make will have an effect. Don't hesitate to make bold adjustments and then assess their impact. Try to keep your meshes as simple as possible. Don't be afraid to remove polygons that will never be shown to players. In Sweet Surrender, our rooms are generated from preset tiles, and we added an extra step to remove the backside of walls. This seems trivial, but it reduced our polygon by 10 to 15%, giving us a few extra frames in a cheap win. Everything is a trade-off. I want to reinforce this point. The Quest is a general-purpose computing device. We have to do so much in so little time each frame. Everything matters, and any significant effect has an impact. Transparency can be a big performance killer. Large particles with transparency, like smoke effects, will destroy your performance. Avoid transparency if you can, and leverage innovative techniques like alpha-to-compute blending. Don't rely on automatic culling. Overdraw can have a big performance impact. Don't simply count on your engine to hide areas that shouldn't be shown. It still has overhead costs. I encourage you to aggressively deactivate areas that shouldn't be visible to players. Here's an example of how we manually show and hide areas as you navigate the environments of Eye of the Temple. On the right is the player's view. On the left is a scene view of everything that is active. You can see areas pop in and out of existence as a player moves through the world. In Sweet Surrender, we only ever render the room you are currently in. All other rooms are disabled until the moment you enter them. Both of these techniques had a big performance impact. Particles are a great way to add life to your scene, but make sure you use them carefully, as they can also quickly impact performance. Either implement a global cap or tune each effect carefully. Finally, if you are close to your target frame rate but are struggling to reach it, look into your output resolution. Sometimes reducing the resolution by just a couple percentage points will help you reach your goals. Another useful technique to explore is foveated rendering. It comes with various trade-offs but can lead to large performance gains. I want to wrap up by pointing you in the direction of more tools, optimization techniques, and documentation. Meta has invested heavily over the years in providing performance solutions for developers. Some of them, like Application Space Warp, can also have a huge impact. Please look into them. They may be particularly well suited to your app. As I said at the start, almost all the VR talks, advice, and techniques shared in the last 10 years are still applicable today. I have collected the most important ones at the link above. There are various topics I didn't even get a chance to touch on, like texture compression settings. The John Carmack keynotes, in particular, are a treasure trove of invaluable advice. I encourage you to investigate them, and I look forward to the next generation of Quest 3 apps.